السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، نحمده ونسبحه ونقدسه على آلائه ونعمائه، ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأن سيدنا محمدا عبده ورسوله أرسله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك وترحم وتحنن على محمد وآل محمد كأفضل ما صليت وسلمت وباركت وترحمت على إبراهيم وآل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. وصل اللهم وسلم على جميع الأنبياء والمرسلين، وعلى خلفاء نبيك وأوصيائه وأهل بيته وعترته علي أمير المؤمنين وقائد الغر المحجلين، وعلى البضعة الطاهرة فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين، وعلى سبطي نبي الرحمة وسيدي شباب أهل الجنة الحسن والحسين عليهما السلام، وعلى علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والخلف الهادي المهدي، عجل الله تعالى فرجه وسهل مخرجه وجعلنا من أنصاره وأعوانه. عباد الله، قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في قرآنه الكريم في سورة التوبة: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم: وما كان المؤمنون لينفروا كافة فلولا نفر من كل فرقة منهم طائفة ليتفقهوا في الدين ولينذروا قومهم إذا رجعوا إليهم لعلهم يحذرون. صدق الله العلي العظيم. This is one of the important verses in the Quran that invites a party of each group, each community, each society to be dispatched to go and learn knowledge from the centers of knowledge, the Islamic knowledge, the Sharia knowledge, the Islamic law, the knowledge of the Holy Quran, the Tafsir of the Quran, and then come back and deliver that to their communities. And the clearest example of the implementation of this verse are the Persian nation, the Persian scholars, the non-Arabs. When I say Persia, it is not today's Iran. It is the ancient Iran, which was much, much more extensive and bigger than contemporary Iran, than today's Iran. That part of the world, to the east of the Arabian Peninsula, east of Iraq. In fact, even Iraq was part of the Persian Empire at some time. So these areas, the Asian countries, were part of the Persian Empire and the ancient Iran. The contribution of those scholars, hundreds of thousands of them, in each and every field of knowledge, their contribution to the Islamic thought, to the Islamic faith, to the Islamic sciences. We know Islam started in Mecca by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Prophet Muhammad is an Arab. He's from Quraysh. His first cousin, Ali ibn Abi Talib, and first lieutenant was from Quraysh too. And then the Prophet moved to Medina. Medina, also Mecca and Medina, are in Hijaz, the heart of Arabia. If you put the Prophet and his family aside and the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, the vast majority of other scholars, the vast majority of them, the Muslim scholars I mean, maybe 90% of them are non-Arabs. Why? Because when they accepted Islam, when they received Islam, when they heard about Islam, they fell in love with this religion. They fell in love with this book, the last revelation of God to mankind, the Holy Quran. And therefore, scores of them left their towns and villages as far as China to the east and India to the south, South Asia. And from all these countries, from the ancient Iran, which used to contain Khurasan. Khurasan was a huge province. Even Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Afghanistan, they were part of the Grand Khurasan, the ancient Khurasan. They left their families, the comfort of their families. Many of them were rich, some of them were poor too. And they traveled to the Islamic cities for one goal and one reason: to learn, to study Islam, to be students of Islam. And in the hadith al-Qudsi, the divine narration of God, إِنِّي جَعَلْتُ الْعِلْمِ فِي الْجُوعِ وَالْغُرْبَةِ وَالنَّاسُ يَطْلِبُونَهُ فِي الْأَهْلِ وَالشِّبَعِ. I made knowledge through two channels. If you want to learn, remember, keep in your mind these two channels: starvation and being lonely, being alone, being away from your family, being away from your parents. These are two reasons for success. If you keep thinking of food and eating, variety of food, different cuisines, you are wasting your time. You cannot focus on knowledge. If you want to stay with your mama at home, okay, she does the food and the drink for you, and she cleans after you, you are not going to study religion. So those Persians, non-Arabs, Iranians, they traveled from all over ancient Persia. They came to cities like Basra, Kufa, Baghdad, Madain, Wasit, Mecca, Medina, Damascus, Cairo, Mosul, Aleppo, Halab, and many other cities to study. Some of them spent 10 years. Some of them spent 50 years. Some of them spent 70 years until they died. They never returned. Some of them returned back to Iran, but some of them never returned back to Iran. Let's begin with both. I need to speak about both traditions, the Shia and the Sunnis. Shia scholars and Sunni scholars in every field. I cannot cover every field today. I'm not going to speak about philosophy, ilm al-kalam, not even fiqh, but samples. I'm going to give you samples within 30 minutes of both sides. People who are muhaddith, transmitters of hadith, jurists, faqih, expert in Islamic law, and then also mufassir of the Quran, exegetes of the Quran from both sides, plus linguistics, scholars of grammar, literature, and language. And you will be surprised, 90% of them are non-Arabs. 90% of them are non-Arabs who put forth the knowledge of grammar. Of course, the pioneer was Imam Ali alayhi salam, as I am going to tell you soon. So, when we come to the Imami tradition, Shia tradition, you come to the field of fiqh and hadith. Number one man is this man, Al-Kulayni, Muhammad ibn Yaqub Al-Kulayni, the author of this book, Al-Kafi. It has many volumes, 8 volumes. This book contains over 16,000 hadith. 16,000 hadith. Phenomenal. This man was born in Kulayn. Kulayn is a village near the city of Ray, which is southern Tehran today. And he traveled to Baghdad to study the knowledge. And then he collected the jewels of Ahlul Bayt, the hadiths of the two imams, mainly two imams, Imam al-Baqir, Imam al-Sadiq, and he puts them in his book, Al-Kafi. This is one example. The second example after him, Al-Shaykh al-Saduq. Again, he was born in Qom, but he lived in Baghdad. He did most of his studies and work in Baghdad, including this book, Faqih man la yahduruhu al-faqih. But then he went back and he's buried in Ray, southern Tehran. His grave is there. So this is the second. Muhammad ibn Ali ibn Babawayh al-Saduq, Persian. Then we come to the third and fourth books in the Shia tradition, because in the Shia hadith we have 4 books. You just saw 2 of them, and these are the other 2. This is At-Tahdhib, Tahdhib al-Ahkam, by Al-Shaykh al-Tusi, Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Tusi. From his name you know where he comes from Tus in Khurasan. But at the age of 23, he left Tus, he went to Baghdad. He lived most of his life in Baghdad until he was attacked, unfortunately. His school, his house, his library was burnt out. He was attacked by sectarianism, by anti-Shia forces. And therefore, unfortunately, he had to leave Baghdad and go to Najaf. I should say fortunately, because he established the first seminary of Ahlul Bayt in the city of Najaf 1,000 years ago. In 6 years, in fact, he established that in 448. This year is 1442. So in about 6 years from now, Najaf is going to celebrate the millennium anniversary of its establishment, the establishment of Al-Hawza Al-Almiya, the grand seminary of Najaf, 1,000 years old, by this man, Muhammad ibn al-Hasan, who wrote 2 books. This one contains almost 14,000 hadith, Tahdhib al-Ahkam. The other one, which also written by him, Al-Istibsar, contains about 5,500 hadiths. Again, this is the book of Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Tusi. So this is in terms of hadith in the Shia tradition. And then in terms of tafsir, the greatest mufassirin of the Holy Quran are non-Arabs, my friends. Among them is Al-Shaykh al-Tabrasi, not Tabarsi, Tabras. Tabras is from the city of Tafrish, near the city of Qum. Tafrish in Farsi, Tabras in Arabic, Tabras. And he finished his book, Majma' al-Bayan, one of the greatest books of tafsir. Both Sunnis and Shias, they cherish this book. This book has been published and printed in Cairo, in Beirut, in Iran, and other countries. A major reference, even Imam Fakhr al-Razi, Muhammad ibn Umar al-Fakhr al-Razi, the greatest Sunni mufassir, he depends on this book, Majma' al-Bayan, of Al-Allama al-Tabrasi. He finished this book in 536 Hijri. This is Allama al-Tabrasi. Of course, al-Tusi, Muhammad ibn al-Hasan, before him, died in 460 Hijri, also wrote a book of tafsir, At-Tibyan, the book of At-Tibyan fi Tafsir al-Quran, which is again one of the greatest references of tafsir. So this is one, Majma' al-Bayan, by Al-Allama al-Tabrasi. And then we have Tafsir al-Qummi. Al-Qummi was from Kufa originally, but then he lived in Qum. Iranians call him Qumi. This is the pronunciation. The Arab calls him Al-Qummi. Same thing with Persia. The Persians say Fars, Ostana Fars, which is Shiraz. The Arabs say Faris. So there is a difference in pronunciation. When you know both languages, most likely you know how to pronounce. So Tafsir al-Qummi, Ali ibn Ibrahim al-Qummi, or al-Qummi, one of the greatest tafsirs. Though he's originally from Kufa, but he lived in Qum and he did his work in Qum. Tafsir al-Ayyashi, again, Ayyashi, his origin is Arab, from the tribe of Tamimi, and he was Sunni. And he converted to the school of Ahlul Bayt, and he wrote, and he lived in Iran, and he wrote the Tafsir al-Ayyashi. Tafsir Abu al-Futuh al-Razi, another Persian tafsir, Rawd al-Jinan. Originally he's from Medina. His origin are from the descendants of one of the Sahaba of the Prophet, but he lived in Naysabur first, Nishabur, and Ray. which is southern Tehran. Tafsir al-Safi, Mullah Muhsin al-Fayd al-Kashani, who died in Kashan. Tafsir Mullah Sadr al-Shirazi, the greatest philosopher, the greatest theologian, the greatest mutakallim, also from Shiraz, as you can tell. And he died in Basra because he was making his way to Hajj, but he got sick in the city of Basra, and he died in the city of Basra. And the best tafasir that the authors are Iranians today, contemporary ones, Tafsir al-Mizan, Al-Allama Muhammad Hussein al-Tabatabai. In my opinion, the most comprehensive tafsir, because this man is Allama. This man is genius. God has given him the best brain, the best knowledge, and because of his piety too. God says, when you are pious, I will bestow knowledge on you. I will bestow hikmah on you. This man was the example of a pious leader, Muhammad Hussein al-Tabatabai. Died almost 40 or 36 years ago. I remember his death. I was a student at that time in the city of Qom. He wrote this tafsir, Tafsir al-Mizan. With this print, beautiful print in Beirut, 20 volumes. You must get this if you understand Arabic. If not, get the Persian or the English translation. Because he includes the opinions of most of the Sunni and Shia exegists, mufassirin. He's very fair. This man is very fair. And then Tafsir al-Amthal, Nasr Makaram Shirazi, who is still living. May God bestow health and long life on him. This is for the young generation. In Farsi, Namuna, Tafsir Namuna. In Arabic, Tafsir al-Amthal. I don't know whether it has been translated to English or not. One of the greatest tafsirs. Of course, we have tafasir written by Arab scholars. This is one of them. Allama Muhammad Jawad al-Balaghi, Ala al-Rahman, one of the greatest books of tafsir, by an Arab, of course. And Tafsir Al-Allama Sayyid Abdullah Shubbar, who is buried in Kadhimain in the shrine of Imam Musa ibn Ja'far alayhi salam, Imam al-Kadhim. He wrote, in fact, 3 tafsirs. One is the big tafsir. The second is the wasit, the middle. And the third one is 1 volume, Al-Wajiz. This is the small one, condensed. The summary. He put it in 1 volume. Allama Abdullah Shubbar. And of course, we have Tafsir al-Burhan, another great tafsir in the Shia tradition, written by an Arab, Sayyid Hashim al-Bahrani from Bahrain, as you can tell. So this is in the school of Ahl al-Bayt. Let's come and see the Persian scholars who are Sunnis. Most of the Sunni scholars are Persians. Come to the madhahib. We have 4 madhab, 4 schools of thought in the Sunni tradition. Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi'i, Hanbali. The first and the fourth are originally from ancient Iran. The first one, Al-Imam Abu Hanifa, An-Nu'man ibn Thabit ibn Zuti. Some people believe that he was born in Kufa, year 80 Hijri. Some people believe that he was born in Kabul, Afghanistan, and then he moved to Kufa. He comes from a Persian family, Imam Abu Hanifa. This is the leader of the Sunni tradition. In fact, the vast majorities of Sunni Muslims follow the tradition of Hanafi, Imam Abu Hanifa, and of course he is buried in Baghdad. And Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, the Imam of the 4th tradition in the Sunni school, who died in 241. Imam Abu Hanifa died in 150 Hijri. Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal died in 241 Hijri. His family, originally from Khurasan, from Marw, His mother came from Maru to Baghdad while she was pregnant with him. So those two Imams are, and Ahmad ibn Hanbal has one of the greatest chains of hadiths, Musnadul Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. This is considered one of the greatest sources of hadith in the Sunni tradition, Musnadul Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. So the two leaders of two important traditions in the Sunni Islam are Persians. Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, the Hanafi and the Hanbali traditions. Maliki is Arab, Malik ibn Anas, though some people say, some researchers say, he also has Persian roots, Imam Malik too. And then we have the Imam Shafi'i, which is an Arab. You come to the sources of hadith in the Sunni tradition, 6 books, Al-Kutub al-Sitta. Al-Kutub al-Sitta. All these 6 books, my friend, all the 6 books are written by non-Arabs, Persians, Iranians, from the ancient Iran. When I say Iranians, I don't mean Iran today. I mean the ancient Iran, which was much bigger in size, triple, quadruple today's size, the ancient Iran. Let's come to Sahih al-Bukhari. Sahih al-Bukhari, written by Imam Muhammad ibn Ismail al-Bukhari. He was born in Bukhara. Where is Bukhara? Bukhara is in Uzbekistan. He died in Samarkand. Samarkand is in Uzbekistan. He lived in Khurasan. He died in 256 Hijri. He wrote his book, Sahih al-Bukhari, almost 240 or 250 years after Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The most important source of hadith in the Sunni tradition. The second book here, is Muslim ibn al-Hajjaj al-Qushayri al-Nayshaburi. Nayshabur is Naysabur, again Khurasan. And he lived with Imam Bukhari, his colleague, his friend Imam Bukhari, in Naysab. And he died in Khurasan, Naysabur, and he died maybe 5 years after Imam Bukhari. Imam Bukhari died 256, Imam Muslim died 261 Hijri. And this is Sahih Muslim, the second book. Then the third one, Sunan Abi Dawud. Abu Dawud as-Sajistani. Sajistan is Sistan. Today is Sistan, which is a province in Iran. Sistan and Baluchistan, province in Iran. And he was contemporary with Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, and he died in 275. Then we come to Imam al-Tirmidhi here, Jami' al-Tirmidhi. Jami' al-Tirmidhi, Muhammad ibn Isa, again Tirmidh, from the greater Khurasan, Bilad ma wara' al-Nahr. He died in 279 Hijri. Then we come to Imam al-Nasa'i, Sunan al-Nasa'i. Sunan al-Nasa'i, Abu Abdurrahman al-Nasa'i al-Khurasani, from Khurasan, died in 303. By the way, this man, you know the reason why he died? Because he made a trip to Damascus. Damascus at that time was a pro-Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, 100%. 100%. Most of them, of course, most of them. And because Imam al-Nasa'i had written earlier a book regarding the virtues of Imam Ali. So they came up to him. They said, listen, you have written a book in favor of Imam Ali. You must write another book in favor of Muawiyah bin Abi Sufyan. He said, but what shall I write? They said, you have to write what the Prophet said to him. He said, the only thing I have in mind the Prophet said about Muawiyah is the hadith, La ashba' Allahu batnah, because the Prophet sent after Muawiyah 3 times. In each time they come to the Prophet and they say, Ya Rasulullah, he's busy eating, he cannot answer you. Let him finish his meal. In the third time, the Prophet say, may God never let his stomach be filled. And this is what happened. He would eat and eat and eat until he says, my jaws are hurting me. My mouth is hurting me, but I'm still hungry. So Imam al-Nasa'i said, this is the only Nasa'i. Nasa is from Tawabi' Khurasan, a village near in the province of Khurasan. He said, that's the only hadith. So they attacked him. They beat him up. And because of his injuries, he died. Rahmatullahi alayhi, Imam al-Nasa'i. From Nasa, from Khurasan. And then the last one, Sunan ibn Majah, Muhammad ibn Yazid ibn Majah Al-Qazwini, from my favorite city, Qazwin. Okay? So those are, my friends, the narrators of hadith in the Sunni tradition. None of them are Arabs. I don't know why Arabs, some of them, of course, they don't like the Persians. I don't know why. Why we have racism. At that time, Iranians would come to Iraq, to Syria, to Cairo, to Mecca, to Medina, to study, to learn. They were not nationalistics. Their religion was more important than anything else. It was more important than their blood and race and color and culture and whatever. Islam was more important. Faith was more important than anything else. And therefore they would learn Arabic so fast because they fell in love with Arabic. Arabic is the language of this book, the Holy Quran. They had no problem learning it. And sometimes the Arabs would travel and live in Iran. Arabs from Iraq, Arabs from Hijaz, Arabs from Syria. They would live in Iran. Many of them lived and died there because they found the freedom. Freedom of religion, freedom of expression, freedom of writing, freedom of working, freedom of teaching, freedom of preaching. They had no problem. Open borders, the policy of open borders, no visa, no passport. They travel freely. Whenever they hear there is a scholar here, they go after him. They travel thousands of miles just to meet one scholar and to study under another scholar. But look what politics does. Hakim al-Naysaburi. Hakim al-Naysaburi came from Naysabur, and he was a chief judge in Naysabur in Khurasan. He came after Bukhari and Muslim, and he started gathering the hadiths that were left out by Bukhari and Muslim. But according to the standards of Bukhari and Muslim, they were very strict in collecting the hadith. So he used the same standards. But of course, they did not have computers at that time. They could not collect the entire hadith. So Al-Hakim al-Naysaburi came after them, and he collected 200 years after them. And he collected the rest of the hadith. Also, he's Persian. His book is important. Mustadrak al-Hakim. In the Sunni tradition, this is a very important book. Then we come to Tafsir, my friends, in the Sunni tradition. Tafsir al-Tabari is the most important Tafsir. جامع البيان عن تأويل آية القرآن تفسير الطبري. الإمام أبي جعفر محمد بن جرير الطبري died 310. He's from Mazandaran. Mazandaran is a province in northern Iran. In fact, he was born in the city of Amul. But then he moved to Baghdad, and he's buried in Baghdad. He came to Iraq to study. So this is the biggest tafsir in the Sunni tradition, is Iranian author. Then you come to the second important tafsir in the Sunni tradition, Tafsir al-Kashaf. Kashaf died in 538 Hijri. Muhammad ibn Umar al-Kharazmi al-Zamakhshari, from the city of Zamakhshar, again in northern Iran. Then you come to At-Tafsir al-Kabir, Imam Fakhruddin al-Razi, Muhammad ibn Umar, who is originally from Mazandaran, the province of Mazandaran, but then he lived in Ray. This is why his name is Al-Razi, because he lived in southern Tehran, the city of Ray. But then he died in Herat in Afghanistan. which used to be part of Khurasan at that time in year 606. Again, this is one of the greatest tafsirs by this great scholar, Muhammad ibn Umar al-Razi, al-Fakhr al-Razi. He's Persian. Then you come to another tafsir by Nisaburi, Gharaib al-Quran. Nisaburi died 730 Hijri. Another tafsir, Tafsir al-Baydawi. Bayda is a village outside Shiraz in the province of Fars or Faris. These are the greatest tafsirs written by Persians. Then the most amazing thing, I have 2-3 minutes to elaborate on this. Language, Arabic language, Arabic grammar, Arabic literature was formulated by Persians. Of course, the first founder, the pioneer of Arabic Nahu and grammar is Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib. Ruhi lahu al-fida. I love this man. He passed down this knowledge of Nahu to his student Abu al-Aswad al-Du'ali in the city of Kufa. But then later on, the iconic figure of Nahu and Arabic grammar is a Shia person by the name of Al-Khalil ibn Ahmad al-Farahidi. Every Arab citizen today, anywhere you travel in Arab countries, ask about his name, they know him. Al-Khalil ibn Ahmad al-Farahidi, follower of Ahlul Bayt, Shia Muslim. That is the founder of modern grammar. And his students, many of them are Persians and Sunnis. Among them is Sibawayh, Amr ibn Uthman, died in 180 Hijri. He's from Shiraz. Sibawayh is from Shiraz. And then Al-Kasai, Ali ibn Hamza, is Persian. He died in the city of Ray, year 200 Hijri. Al-Akhfash, Sa'id ibn Sa'da, from Kharazm, died in 215 Hijri. Az-Zajjaj is Persian. Abu Ali al-Faris, from the city of Fasa in Fars, in Shiraz, near Shiraz. Still exists the city, Abu Ali al-Faris. In fact, there is an important saying in Arabia, in Arab countries, that grammar started from Iran and ended in Iran. Arabic grammar started from Sibawayh in Iran, who's from Shiraz, and ended again with Abu Ali al-Faris from Shiraz, from the same city. Can you imagine the beginning of the grammar, the end of the grammar? فتح النحو بفارس وختم بفارس. It was conquered in Fars and concluded in Fars. That is the journey of Arabic grammar. Why? Because they loved the language of Quran. They had no discrimination, they had no prejudice, they had no racism. They honored Arabic because it's the language of Prophet Muhammad, the language of Ahlul Bayt, the language of the companions of the Prophet. Even, my friends, Tariq was written, Islamic history is written by Persians, the most important books. The first one is Tariq ibn Ishaq. Ibn Ishaq, the very first historian in the history of Islam. He's Persian. Then Tariq al-Tabari, again, this is from Amul, Tabaristan, Mazandaran, Iran. Muhammad ibn Jarir, the most important book in history, written by Persian, written by non-Arab. What else do you want? In fact, they say, أعمدة الأدب العربي أربعة. There are 4 works that are considered the 4 foundations and pillars of Arabic literature. 3 of them are written by Arab, 1 of them is written by non-Arab. The 3 that are written by Arab, Al-Kamil lil-Mubarrad, Al-Bayan wa Tabyin lil-Jahid, he was Mu'tazilite from Basra, Iraq, he was Iraqi. Al-Nawadir li-Abi Ali al-Qali. These written by Arabs. But then you come to another one which is written by someone whose origin is non-Arab, and that is Adabul Katib libni Qutayba Danyuri or Danyuri. Danyur is a village outside Kufa. This man was born, Ibn Qutayba, outside Kufa, So he's considered from Kufa and died in Baghdad, but originally he's non-Arab. This is, my friend, brief introduction onto the contributions of non-Arab scholars, Persian scholars, into Islam, into Islamic knowledge, Islamic sciences, Islamic thought, Islamic faith. They enriched Islam. يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا. We made you into tribes and languages. You speak Turkish, he speaks Farsi, he speaks Arabic, he speaks French, he speaks Spanish, he speaks English, he speaks Urdu. You are one family. In fact, those scholars, you know, if you come to their life, you will see them marrying, having no problem marrying someone from a different race, different blood, different language. Prophet Muhammad had wives that many of them did not speak Arabic. They learned Arabic later on. Many of them were non-Muslims, non-Arabians. And also our Imams. Also our Imams, the family of the Prophet. Many of their wives were non-Arabs. They interact with each other, because mankind is one family. Race and blood has no meaning. Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum. The most honorable among you in the eyes of God, the one with the most reverence for God. May Allah protect you all. We're going to commemorate Arba'in of Imam Hussein this coming Wednesday, October 7th, inshallah. And then the day of Arba'in will be October 8th, and then Friday for 3 nights, inshallah. We commemorate the Arba'in of Imam Hussein. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.